Well, hello, Don Hennessy.
Morning,
Would you,
Barbara.
would you like to say a few words about yourself first?
Well, I'm 80 years of age, so I've been working for the past 40 years almost in the area of domestic abuse and violence. Prior to that, I had several other roles, um, and I grew up intending to be a missionary priest. And that didn't work out. And I think I was a little bit at sea in terms of what I should do for myself for a number of years until I found the the I suppose the huge difficulty that is created by family violence and abuse that was being ignored. I encountered it in what we would call relationship counseling, and I was attracted to finding out something about the abusers as distinct from everybody else seeming to want to write about the victims and how they experienced what was going on. And I think that led me into realizing that people had no idea what these guys were up to. And that
Mm.
kind of fascinated me. So that's why I followed on, working with them for years, and then confirming my ideas by talking to women and by talking to target women and how they were impacted by things that hadn't really occurred to them. They didn't really realize what was happening around them. And that's what I've spent the rest of my life trying to clarify and trying to explain to target women that this is actually what's happening. And this is why they feel so bad without knowing why they feel so bad or without being able to explain it in detail to other people.
Mm. And I gather you're a married man and you've got several kids. How many
A married
children?
man. She's still living with me, and I have 5 children and 6 grandchildren.
Wow. You're very fortunate. I've got one daughter,
Hmm.
and so far she's had no children.
Right.
Um, yeah, and I'm a divorced woman. And for those who are watching the video and don't know who I am, I'm a writer. My book is called Not Under Bondage, Biblical Divorce for Abuse, Adultery and Desertion. And I run the blog Crying Out for Justice.blog,
Hmm.
which focuses on domestic abuse in a Christian context.
Right.
So, uh, I've made a list of questions, so I'm flipping over to look at that.
Fine. It's
Okay,
fine.
reflecting back over your life and career, what do you think is the most important wisdom insight that you've contributed to humanity?
That's a very deep question now, Barbara. This hour of the morning here.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
I'm not sure if I've contributed anything to humanity. I wouldn't be presumptuous enough to think that I have, but I realize that I'm repeatedly told that my explanations of the process of grooming and setting up and targeting as well, that those give flesh to a process that nobody was aware of. So I think I've uncovered that little bit of the game and how it actually operates.
I would agree. And I would say that's a significant contribution to humanity.
All right, thank you. I'll accept that.
Yeah. And I'll flesh out a little bit from what you've said. I think your main contribution is that you've, as well as the what you call the grooming process, which maybe an even better term would be the predatory entrapment process.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't invent that term, but I learned it recently.
Right.
So as well as that, you've named the core driver of what you call male intimate abuse, which is the men who target and obtain a female intimate partner long term.
Yes.
The core driver of those men is that they believe they're entitled to sexually exploit and mistreat their female partners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like a lot of other men, they believe they're entitled to get sexual gratification without having to negotiate. But
Yes.
the male intimate abuser is doing it in the context of a long-term intimate partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on that question, if the core driver of these guys is sexual, I've read accounts from women who are victims of domestic abuse, victim survivors, and in those accounts, in some of them, it seems like the man's core goal might have been financial, or
Mm-hmm.
certainly the economic abuse and the sexual abuse were kind of running equal place in the race, so to speak,
Yes.
in his. So would you like to comment on that?
Well, my belief is that all other forms of abuse, and there are a number of different forms of abuse, financial being one of them, but all the other forms of abuse are what I call a smokescreen for his real intention. That he can explain or she can explain to the world he doesn't give me any money, or we don't have any holidays, or he doesn't finish building the house, or whatever other complaints that she has, and they act as a smokescreen for what happens in the bedroom. And for 20 years or so, women were reluctant to tell me what actually happened in their bedrooms, and I wasn't surprised at that. It's normal for women to be uh, unclear about whether they had a role to play in the bedroom, or whether they were ashamed of to tell me what was going on in the bedroom. So it's only in the last few years we've had a substantial movement here in Ireland where coercive control became a crime, and it's treated as a public occasion when they go to court. So the crimes of coercive control are held in public, and people have been reporting what's actually gone on in the bedroom in these cases. And a lot of my clients now are quite prepared to tell me about what's happened in the bedroom over
Wow.
the years. So that's been a move forward for me. Before that, I would ask the question. The question I normally asked was, have you ever had sex when you didn't want it? And the
Mm-hmm.
normal reply was, no, that never happened.
Ah.
So I was shut out of that for a while. One of the things that has kind of stunned me in a way is the amount of women that have told me that instead of being overused, instead of feeling just like a piece of an object of some description, that a lot of women were, their sense of rejection in the bedroom was very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that at the time. That was something new to me. I couldn't get my head around it for a while, that being rejected was troublesome for them. But it really fundamentally, it was somebody rejecting their whole being, their whole femininity, their whole humanity. And to have that rejected regularly was very, very painful.
Mm. It's not surprising to me that the women were, when you used to ask them that question, they would say, no, that's never happened. I mean, it's hard for a woman to talk about the sexual abuse she's experienced, even to another woman. But telling
Oh, yeah,
another man is that much more difficult.
absolutely, absolutely.
And it's partly to protect the man, and it's partly to guard herself in case, like, because not that I'm suggesting you might think salacious thoughts or probe in some kind of, spectator sport way.
Mhm.
But yeah, women are really, and so few women ever get asked. So, like, the first answer would be no, change
Yeah,
the subject, yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm gonna. I once had a conversation with a woman who worked as a private prostitute part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And we had an interesting conversation, and she told me that there are 3 ethnic groups that she refuses to accept as clients:
Mm.
Irishmen, Chinese men, and African men. So, of course, I asked her why, and she said they're brutal. They really enjoy causing pain
Yeah.
to the woman.
Mm.
Whereas men from other ethnic groups, yes, they'll do what they want to do, and they might be more willing to negotiate about, are you willing to do this? And she might say no
Yeah.
and accept that. But with those 3 ethnic groups, whatever you agree to doing with them, there's this sadism
Sure.
that really comes across. And so she decided she just wouldn't accept them as clients. Now, that's interesting. And I'm wondering I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that, because you've been dealing with Irish women, and they're obviously mostly, targeted by Irish men.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think um, I don't have any sense of comparison, but I do think that what I've been hearing in the last 5 years from Irish women has a sense of sadism attached to their behaviours and a sense of complete disregard for the woman as a person. So the men that I've encountered, they do what they want to do without any acknowledgement as to how it impacts on the woman.
Yeah.
And that to me is very sad, because I remember my mother telling me back in the 60s, which is quite some time ago now, that it was she was instructed by the clergy whom she followed religiously. She was instructed by the clergy that she had to be available to my dad whenever it suited him. And that's how she lived her life. She told my 3 sisters, she told them that as well, that when you get married, you'll be obliged to be available to your partner whenever it suits him.
Yeah. So evil. And the church has made it. Yeah, that's really, really wicked. Because the Bible says, 1 Corinthians 7, verses 3 to 4, that in the marital bedroom or the bedchamber, both partners have authority over the other partner's body, complete authority. So if one partner doesn't want to do something or isn't comfortable, or halfway through doesn't want to do it anymore, they can exercise that authority and say no.
Yes.
And so there's any marital intimacy, if it's according to the Bible, has to be happening by mutual
agreement. Yeah.
And there's no such thing as this garbage that the priests have told. And it's not only in the Roman Catholic Church, that's often been taught in Protestant churches too.
I'm sure it has, yeah. I'm sure it
Yeah.
has.
So, yeah. Now, let's go to the power and control wheel.
Mhm.
In your interview with Kerry McAvoy, I was intrigued by what you said there. You talked about the power and control wheel, and what that image doesn't show is the steel rim holding the wheel together, and that the steel rim is invisible. Like if we think of a bicycle with its
Sure.
tire on, of course you don't really see that inside of the steel. Well, you might see a fragment of it, but basically it's hidden by the
Mhm.
tire. So, and that steel rim is invisible in the power and control wheel. And you said it's the man's goal to have sexual dominance in the relationship. That's what that steel rim represents. Have I understood
Yes.
you correctly?
Yes, I think it holds the whole uh, activity together.
Mm-hmm.
That all the other, as I say, all the other scenarios, all the other tactics that he uses to control the woman are designed to have her be available to him sexually.
Yeah.
So if she has no money, or if her children are upset, or she feels that he's jealous of her talking to some other guy or whatever, she will set out to prove to him that she is a good wife and is available to him whenever he needs it.
Mm, yeah. So I'm just going to show on the screen, if I'm clever enough with Zoom, the power and control wheel on the black outside part, which represents the tire, if we're thinking of a wheel. It's got physical and sexual violence.
Together,
And in the
yes,
hub, and in the hub it says power and control. And then there's
yes,
all those different sections, which are the smokescreen, as you're calling it, or the ways he has obtained the power without her realizing. No, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up my words. In my view, the wheel seems to portray the later tactics used by the abuser. But in my view, it doesn't show, or doesn't show well enough, the predatory entrapment part.
it doesn't show it at all.
Yes.
Like Ellen Pence was the woman who was in charge of Duluth for years and years. It was they designed the wheel initially.
Yeah. Yeah.
I spoke to her she was in Ireland twice. I met her twice. And on
Okay.
both occasions, I asked her where the information came from, where they developed the wheel.
Yeah.
And it was written by women, even though they did engage with men in one of their projects in Duluth. They actually didn't ask the men anything. They told the men what they thought the men needed to know. So their process of engaging was to believe that because a woman told them something, that they had enough information to engage with the men. And the women they were talking to had no idea how they ended up where they were.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's what they missed. She then told me, I'm sure it wasn't confidential because there was three other people sitting at the table. She told us that her dad separated from mom, and dad went away, and maybe every year or 18 months dad would come home for a month, and then he'd disappear again, and then she would have another sibling the following year. So I said, Ellen, do you realize why he came home? And she said, well, he wanted to see me and he wanted to see some of my other siblings who were alive. And I said, no, he came home for sex. Oh, that's not true. She said she couldn't believe that her dad would have been like that. She couldn't accept. So while she did a huge amount of work in analysing the process, she failed to accept that what a man could be really like.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've never heard that before. I knew that she and her colleagues at the Duluth Centre formulated the wheel by, asking the women,
Yes,
the victims of the abuse, tell us about it. And they got all that information from the women. I believe they had, butcher's paper or a big whiteboard or something, and the women just kept on adding things. And eventually they thought, well, let's put them in these categories, like the spokes. Yeah. But of course, the women who were there were all at the stage of the process where they'd realised they were being abused and they needed help.
absolutely. Yeah.
No woman would have gone to the Duluth Centre in the early stages where she was being entrapped, because she wouldn't have thought this man was abusing her. So so
and even if she did go in the initial stages, if her abuser was skilled, she wouldn't know it was happening. This is the real
that's
difficult.
right.
It
Exactly.
would never register with her. She would think this is
Never.
all part of being in love. This is
Yes.
all part of building a relationship. And I know I have to take my share of development and growth so that I'll be a good partner for this man. And she would actually, the one of the things that really, I suppose I've confirmed it numerous times now, because any new client I get, I always ask them within 2 or 3 sessions about when they took responsibility.
Yeah.
And when they took the blame, when it was their fault that he was upset. And they could remember really right at the beginning of the relationship, without knowing what was going on. They would say, oh yeah, I knew I would upset him if I did that or didn't do that. So I began to watch myself. I began to take care of how I behaved. I began to try to make myself a little better and not to fall into that trap again. But I was concentrating on my own behavior rather than his behavior. And that's a huge power shift in her life then.
Yes. Yeah. I'm having memories, my own memories coming back, but I won't try to articulate them right now.
But I haven't said anything that you wouldn't agree with, have I?
Oh, no. No.
Right.
Wow. Now, the Duluth model people, they say on their website, the Duluth project, they say the wheel is copyright.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
But they also say somewhere that the wheel can be adapted, but if you want to adapt it, you've got to kind of submit your adapted version to them for them to kind of tick off and approve of, or something like that. You know, I'm not sure whether you or you and I would have a chance of getting Duluth to I'm imagining, sorry, I'm starting at the beginning, at the end, not the beginning. I'm thinking that there needs to be another image, not necessarily a wheel, but another really good image that portrays in one simple form the predatory entrapment and that steel rim, the man's core goal, and all of that stuff. The stuff that you've found out about, I think there needs to be an image that puts that in one clear picture.
I was speaking to my colleagues in California last night, and see, you were early in the morning and they're late at night. I'm caught in the middle. And last night they are doing a design which has 3 gear wheels with the various things in it, like doing the predatory behaviours, and then the middle of it, they have a different wheel as well. And they put them in gears. It makes it like everything drives everything else.
Yes.
They're very technical about computers.
Oh.
So they call it an algorithm.
Yep.
I have no idea what an algorithm is, but it sounds very impressive. But they say that whatever piece of information, whatever statement the guy makes, it goes into this process and it turns all the little gear wheels around.
Yes.
And it's absorbed in this process, and she has no idea what's going on inside her head, but it links into this algorithm that goes round and round and feeds her anxiety and feeds her confusion.
I am so excited. That's an answer to prayer, because I was kind of proposing that you and I tried to develop some kind of graphic image, but it sounds like these friends of yours are way ahead and way better than I and you could do it. So, that's wonderful.
One of the girls, they're 60 plus years old, they're retired almost, and one of them was senior computer analyst with IBM. So she knows her way around the computer and she can design all these things. So when I get them from her, I'll get their permission to send them on to you, and you can have a look at them. And
Yes.
I certainly don't have any need to put a limit on what people use the information for. I think everybody needs to share the information and develop it as we can, as we go. Yeah.
Yes. Fantastic. That's really exciting. Wow. Now, in one of your books, you mention a little bit about Evan Stark, the author of Coercive Control, that book. 2007, I think it came out. He's deceased now. Yes. Now, you said in one of your books or somewhere that you and he disagreed on something. Can I ask, I want to drill into that. When did that conversation take place? And please give us some more information about how you and he differed.
Okay, so my memory, I don't have a written memory of it, but it was around the year 2000.
Okay.
And I was convinced by what I had read from various sources to that time that what the movement, if we call them the movement, the worldwide movement dealing with this issue, were all dealing with the effects of the control.
Yes.
And I used to use a very vulgar description. I said, it's like dealing with bowel cancer by treating the diarrhea and the bleeding and the pain without actually examining the tumor.
Yes.
And when I met Evan Stark, I asked him that question: how much work had he put in with men? And he said he never interviewed the men. He only took the information from women. And that disappointed me in a way. But like he did do a lot of good, but he did it only from the view of victims and women who had been through the mill. And he never gave any of his energy into analysing the guys.
And when you had that conversation with him, did you manage to get him thinking about how maybe he should
No, I don't think so, because I did write to him afterwards. As a matter of fact, I had made contact with his wife, Flitcroft, and Anne Flitcroft, he was married to, and she wrote some books way, way back in the 60s, I imagine. And I had made contact with the two of them before he ever came to Ireland, before Evan Stark ever wrote Coercive Control. And I was kind of developing my own thinking, if you like, at the time, and I was just running it by them, and uh, there wasn't a disagreement with me about anything that I was thinking until it came to actually analysing the role the man played in all of it. I
Hang
never
on,
thought of
can
it
I
that way.
interrupt you, Don? Because you froze for a little bit.
All
So
right.
it hasn't captured everything you've said. So can you just try to repeat the last part of what you just said there?
Well, I tried to elaborate on where I was in my thinking at the time, focusing on the behaviour of him, and they both admitted to me that they'd never thought of it that way.
When you brought that up, did you get the impression that he was kind of a little bit resistant or indignant, even that you were bringing up this idea of talking to the men and interviewing the men?
No, I don't think so. I think he did see an academic way of analysing what I was proposing, putting my statement out in public, then that'd be fine. But he wasn't going to be associated with it because I didn't have any academic research to back it up.
Yeah. This ivory tower silo thing of academics versus
Don't get me started. This is early in the morning. If I get started now, my
Yes.
poor wife will be listening to it for the day.
Okay, we won't go there. All right. Now, have you changed or revised any of your ideas since writing your first 3 books?
I think I haven't changed them as such, but I've developed some ideas that I hadn't put into the books, but since I give it more thought. So I was in the last couple of, I suppose the last year or so, I've been fascinated by how did we end up here? Because 100 years ago, women just got beaten.
Yes.
And then the laws eventually were introduced that says you can't beat your wife. And that gradually developed. And I think the men actually found another way. So I think what I would call the brainwashing and the mind control was developed by men because they could no longer beat their wives.
Yes.
So I'm not certain of that yet. I mean, I'd need some other people to consider it as well. So I'm putting it out to you now. I put it out to my people in California, and Kerry McAvoy, I mentioned it to her. She said she'd come back to me on it some stage. She hasn't come back yet. But I would like to get other people to think about that and how we arrived at this particular part of
Well,
development.
I can tell you straight away, intuitively, and my gut feeling and common sense
Mm-hmm.
says everything. Your hypothesis makes a great deal of sense. There might be other contributing factors in addition to the fact that, the laws made it harder for men to beat their wives.
Yes.
But yeah, that I would say that's so logical. Right.
And one of the things that just to introduce this idea to you, one of the things that the Americans were saying last night to me was that possibly when women went to work, that after the Second World War, well, during the Second World War, women were doing a lot of work in the factories and that kind of stuff. And when they went to work, they had colleagues at work who they could talk to a little bit. And that's when women began to get a voice.
Yes, yes. All of those things I'd agree with too, yeah. And feminist discourse and discussion and research and all of that stuff, that's all definitely been well discussed and documented in the feminist literature. And of
Sure,
course,
sure.
both men and women can be feminists, in case anybody's wondering.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Now, okay. In your next book, which you've got the working title, We Need to Talk About Him, I'm wondering whether you'll be interacting in that book with any of the things that David Mandel says in his book. Do you know his book? It's called Stop Blaming Mothers and Ignoring Fathers: How to Transform the Way We Keep Children Safe from Domestic Violence.
I haven't read his book, no.
And he talks about pivoting to the perpetrator, turning our
Mm-hmm.
focus from the victim to the
Yes.
perpetrator. And one nice phrase he uses is domestic violence is a parenting choice.
Oh. Mm.
Yeah. Um, okay, so now let's talk about the term psychophile that you coined. And
Right.
I'm going to quote a little thing that you've written about it. A psychophile targets the psyche, that's the mind, of the woman he has selected as his target for a long-term intimate relationship. It is by befriending her mind that he can establish, maintain, and intensify his control of her. When a woman is being targeted by one of these men, she is not aware of his sinister agenda. We must examine and reveal the accurate, effective, and intentional processes used by the skilled offender. These tactics can clearly be described as a kind of brainwashing. All the psychophiles that I have met have the skill to surreptitiously carry out this brainwashing while pretending to be in love.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you still using the term psychophile?
Yes.
How much traction do you think the term has got?
Well, I'm both my contacts in the States and some women from Britain who have been on the phone to me over the last 6 or 8 months.
Mm.
They also have seen it as being a useful word to actually encapsulate what's going on.
Yeah.
And they think they have started to use it in their own work when they work with clients and stuff like that. They have started to
Mm-hmm.
use that word and
Mm.
explain what it is composed of and what it's meant to explain and what it's meant to justify.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That phrase, befriending her mind, is like that really rang true
Mm-hmm.
for me and for many of the readers of my blog. Yeah. Um, Now, I know you're not a qualified, diagnostician, and I don't have a great respect for a lot of those mental health diagnosticians anyway, and I certainly don't have a lot of respect for the DSM or the European version of the diagnostic manual. But that's a prelude to say this question. Would you say that a psychophile is a particular type of psychopath?
I don't think so, but I think he practices tactics that are common with psychopaths, but he only does it surreptitiously, so nobody actually can say, "Oh, he's a psychopath. He's a psychopath." So it is the subtlety and the covert nature of his tactics that are very hard to define, and they're very hard to identify in a way which says, "Oh, there he goes now. He's being a psychopath today." The one thing about these men, and I've worked with groups of them, is that they are all very different in how they approach the issue, but they are all very similar in how they approach their partner. So I don't think one label will cover all of that. So to call somebody a psychopath is probably enlarging his behavior in a way which people won't accept. So we have a different view of a psychopath. We have a guy who is out to harm the world really in some way for a particular cause or something like that. Um, there was a man, Scott Peck, he was an American
Yeah.
psychiatrist, and Scott Peck said in one of his books about evil, he said that the evil people that I encountered have not been in the prisons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These people have done evil things, but they're not evil people. He said the evil people are walking around and we all respect them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, then we could, and I won't go there, but we could, if we wanted to, have a long discussion about the misconceptions about psychopathy that are in the
Yes, yes.
popular mind and in the DSM and the mental health professionals. Yeah. But I won't go there because that would take too much time. Okay, now you've also said that psychephiles are more devious than pedophiles. Why do you think that?
Well, we'll start with the pedophile. The pedophile is somebody who can groom a child, and grooming a child is much easier than grooming an adult. So confidentially, I've been abused by a number of pedophiles when I was a young boy. And so the amount of effort that they needed to target me and to groom me and to abuse me was quite minimal. I mean, I had no idea what was going on, and it worked very well for them. But when you're dealing with an adult, you have to, first of all, tell her, convince her that you are the man for her. And that takes more skill. That takes probably a slightly longer operation in terms of consistency for a while. And so the grooming process for a young woman is more intense and more measured until such time as it begins to be successful. So that can take some time for an adult. So the guy who's doing it, who's grooming an adult, needs to be much more aware of the progress that he's making.
Okay. What about the fact that pedophiles, serial pedophiles, also have to groom all the adult gatekeepers around the child that they're targeting?
Well, that's a different process. That's just a process of uh, covert operation, if you like, where nobody will be aware of what the abuse is. It won't even dawn on the adults around the child that this might be. It would come as a complete shock
Yeah.
to parents and the other people in the child's life to find out that this happened. So it's they're almost they're hidden in plain sight, these people. Like they're everywhere, but like people don't regard them as such. People regard them as being genuine members of the community, with leading the scouts, or being in the clergy, or being a teacher, or whatever they find themselves. But they have a status within the community. And that makes it very easy for them to actually groom the adults involved with the child.
So I think I get what you're saying. With the pedophile has to groom the adults who are the gatekeepers around the child. And he has to groom the child, but that's two different audiences, so to speak.
Oh, indeed, yeah, very different.
And it's pretty easy to groom a child.
Mm-hmm.
No offence to children when I said that. Please don't take offence. Anybody who's been groomed by a pedophile, it wasn't your fault. But with a psychophile, he's got to groom the adult who is his target. So it's like you're putting the two types together almost. Yeah.
No.
And that requires more deviousness and more long.
It does, because what he needs is access. Once the abuse starts to happen, he needs to have the woman available to him. And that's the first part of the relationship, that she will not reject him. She will not run away. If he's not skilled, he will do it too quickly. He'll become abusive too quickly, and she'll say, I'm not having any more of that. But if he does it well, she is entrapped before he ever becomes abusive. That's their skill. So the pedophile doesn't do that, because you probably recognize over the years that pedophiles, they move from one child to the other very readily and very quickly. They can have several children going at one time. So they don't need a relationship. But they don't need a relationship with the child. If they can't have access to the child, they'll find another child.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you for explaining that. Now, I believe that psychophiles can sometimes be pedophiles.
Oh, without a doubt.
So I know cases where the man's a pedophile, serial pedophile, multiple children, and he targets single mothers with kids. You know, and if he's got a particular age or sex of children that he likes to abuse, he'll look for the single mothers with that type of child, you know. But there's also the opportunistic pedophile, who probably may not have nearly as many in the hundreds like the serial pedos do of victims. And so some psychophiles can become opportunistic pedophiles during the relationship with the woman, or after if she manages to leave and get away from him, but still has to provide the child for access thanks to the iniquities of the family courts, then the psychophile might then become an opportunistic pedophile. So I know of cases like that. So can you talk to that a little bit? Because you didn't talk about that in any of your books.
Well, I suppose it's sort of personal for me in a way, and maybe I have a little bias in one particular direction, but the pedophiles who actually abused me were all connected with the church, because that's where I was going. That's where I was heading for, and that's what I wanted to be involved in. So
Yeah.
they were, one of them was he was a layman, but he was the school teacher in primary school that I went to, who had the first communion boys permanently. He taught the second class permanently.
Yeah.
And when I was a young man, we still wore short pants. In
Yeah.
that time, we didn't have long pants; wasn't the norm for kids of 6 or 7 years of age. And he used to bring me up to the front of the class, and he used to get me
Mm-hmm.
to read and have his hands all over inside my pants while I was reading and all that. And I didn't tell anybody that. I didn't know what the hell was going
Mm.
on really, but that's how he
Mm.
started. And
Mm.
he eventually invited
Mm.
me to his own home for some
Mm.
extra training and extra teaching. And I was 8 or 9 years of age at that stage, but he horribly abused me for a while. So I'm not sure if I'm sort of biased by that in some way, but I did do some little bit of research afterwards with my classmates and some people who were ahead of me in school. And when I met them afterwards, I said, "Did you have any trouble with this man?" And some of them had. So I
Yeah.
wasn't the only one. And like you said, they had already availability of young boys to be abused. Um, so you see, this man was married with 4 children,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to
Yeah.
everybody in town, he was an exceptional guy, and he was so good at bringing kids through for first communion, and they were all so well educated in terms of what the communion meant and how they should handle it and all of that. So he had a huge respect.
Yeah.
He was also the deputy head of the local Boy Scouts.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so he had a lot of young boys available to him.
Mm. Mm.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I've given it that much thought, but for him it was effortless
Oh, yeah.
to,
Mm.
to abuse boys, effortless,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And he was an exceptional guy in the parish. My father, who was pretty dedicated to the church, was a very good friend of his, and they organized processions and all of that. He'd be involved in that kind of thing, and in taking care of parish funds and stuff like that. So he was heavily involved in the community that way. And my dad had a lot of respect for him. And my dad was also uh, head of the Scouts for 11 years, and this guy was
Oh,
his assistant.
mm.
So it came as quite a shock to my dad eventually as to what was being revealed.
Mm.
I think it really troubled my dad until he died, really, that he was part of that process, you know.
Mm.
And the other pedophiles that I am familiar with were all clergy, and they didn't seem to have an interest in adult women or adult
Mm.
men, although somebody did tell me that one of the guys was actually a gay man as well, that he
Mm.
was interested in men, but I didn't have any direct experience of that or know
Mm.
anybody involved. But I think that the pedophile is he has sort of lost any sort of status he has in the community now. Anybody who's a paedophile now is immediately ostracized almost from the communities once it's
If
proven.
they're yes, if they're exposed.
Yeah, but I think what's really strange is that guys who've been psychophiles and have abused their wives and their children maybe even as well, that they are still
Oh, yeah.
protected. They still get the
Yeah.
sympathy of the community. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
there is.
mm, thank you for sharing that. The women who were the victims of the psychophiles that you've talked with, have any of them talked about their husbands or exes abusing not only themselves, the adult women, but children, like sexually molesting, raping, etc.
Yes, it's something that I've only kind of delved into in the recent past, but let's say in the last 2 or 3 years, I've asked my clients, had they any concerns about how their children were being treated. One woman who was highly academic lady, senior consultant doctor in one of the hospitals here, she said, "Oh my Jesus," she said to me when I mentioned it, she said he walks into her bedroom, child is about 12 now, her daughter, and all I know is he doesn't have any clothes on him. That never dawned on me as anything other than stupidity or whatever. And now she was seeing it very differently. And she said that she actually got rid of him. He's gone from the house now. And her daughter is much happier. So she thinks there may have been something going on there. She's no definite proof. She doesn't want to bring it up to the daughter yet. But
let the daughter raise it maybe, or get some advice from experts who work with sexually abused kids. Yeah, wow. Okay, now we've only got about 5 minutes until. So, how are you going with our convo?
Well, I think I would like to wrap it up for today.
Okay, email to confirm, etc. That sounds great, because I've definitely got more things that I'd love to talk to you about.
Okay. And I must apologize. I'm hopeless when it comes to replying to emails and texts and everything. It could be 2 or 3 days before I say, "Oh, I must answer that." So that's my apology. But I'll let you know I get it as soon as I get it from now on, so that you don't have to worry.
Even if you just send me a thumbs up or
Perfect. Yeah.
received or anything you like. Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you very much, Don. God bless you.
Good to see you. Bye, Barbara.
You too.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.